American soldiers are fighting Russian soldiers. So this is not a regional conflict in Eastern Europe. This is a hot war between the two primary nuclear superpowers on Earth. And yet this war has never been formally declared. It has not been authorized by Congress. And for that reason, this war is a violation of American law. It is a crime. Second thing we learned from these slides is that despite direct US involvement, Ukraine is in fact losing the war. 7 Ukrainians are being killed for every Russian. Ukrainian air defenses have been utterly degraded. Ukraine is losing. The Biden administration is perfectly aware of this. They're panicked about it, but they have lied about this fact to the public. Just 2 weeks ago, for example, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin told the US Senate that Russian military power is, quote, waning. In other words, Russia is losing the war. That was a lie. He knew it was when he said it, but he repeated it in congressional testimony. That is a crime. But Lloyd Austin has not been arrested for committing that crime. Instead, the only man who has been taken into custody, or likely ever will be, is a 21-year-old Massachusetts Air National Guardsman who leaked the slides that showed that Lloyd Austin was lying. He revealed the crimes, therefore he's the criminal. What exactly is, quote, sensitive American nuclear technology? Sensitive American nuclear technology? Probably not to produce energy. No one in the media is going to ask that question. But if it's in the middle of Ukraine, in the middle of a war, it stands to reason this sensitive American nuclear technology has military applications. In other words, these are nuclear weapons. What else could they be? We'll stop speculating there. But take 3 steps back. This is all so crazy and so reckless, it is hard to believe it's happening. Here you have a Democratic president gone completely off the rails, completely, with existentially dangerous consequences, prosecuting a war that can only hurt the United States. A war with no upside. It is awful to watch. But it is not without precedent. Something similar happened 55 years ago in 1968, another remarkably turbulent and ugly year in American history that has many parallels to this. That spring, in March of 1968, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., the former Attorney General, the brother to the slain president, announced his candidacy against the incumbent, fellow Democrat Lyndon Johnson. And the overriding issue, then as now, was a pointless war then in progress. To be clear, Robert F. Kennedy was not against all war on principle. He was against that war because he believed, with a lot of evidence, that it was not helping the United States in any way. But you weren't allowed to say that. He did. Party bosses hated him for that, but rank-and-file Democrats loved him. They put pictures of his face in their homes like icons. In the end, they named a football stadium after him in Washington. That was more than half a century ago. But now Kennedy's son is embarking on a similar challenge to his own party, and for similar reasons. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced today that he is running for president in the primary against Joe Biden. In fact, this is pretty clearly the beginning of the end for Joe Biden. We can't prove that. The future is unknowable. But holy smokes, it does not look good. And it doesn't look good in a very recognizable way. Somewhere in his basement rec room, drinking a Courvoisier on ice, Andrew Cuomo is chuckling to himself. He's seen this movie before. Joe Biden's own aides keep finding stacks of felonies he's left around the place, in his office, in his car. And instead of throwing this evidence in the fireplace, as under normal circumstances they would, they're sending these documents on to the Justice Department. That's not a good sign. Meanwhile, Biden's Attorney General, the most unscrupulous, unethical Attorney General this country has ever had, has somehow decided that actually, in order to maintain his unsullied record of nonpartisanship, he's going to have to pass these documents, these stacks of felonies, onto an independent counsel because that always works out well for a sitting president. And by the way, in this case, the independent counsel is a Republican. So the Department of Justice knew on November 4th that Joe Biden had committed crimes. November 4th was 4 days before a pivotal midterm election. So naturally, the DOJ didn't issue a press release about it. They didn't dispatch the FBI to raid Biden's home in Rehoboth and root through Dr. Jill's underwear drawer. No chance of that. Biden may be a terrible president, but he's still a Democrat. It's not like he's orange. So Merrick Garland, who is, and we cannot emphasize this enough, a soulless hack who will do anything the Democratic Party requires of him, Merrick Garland kept the news secret long enough to keep other Democrats out of the blast zone. Why hurt everybody else? They're just trying to hurt one guy. It's Joe Biden. So it wasn't until today that we knew Biden had been stashing state secrets in his Corvette. If you're still wondering where there is an organized effort within the White House to hurt Joe Biden, all you need to know is this: his staff keeps putting him out there in public to talk, which of course he can't do. He can barely read a prepared statement. Notice they did not do that during the last presidential campaign in 2020 because they knew it wouldn't help and they wanted the White House. And it helps even less now, but they're doing it. Why are they doing that now? Well, here's a guess. Right after the midterm elections in November, Joe Biden made it clear he had no plans to step aside and make way for Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom or Michelle Obama. I'm thinking of running again, he said, and he seemed to mean it. Oh, he shouldn't have said that. Next thing you know, he's got a special counsel crawling around his life, armed with subpoena power and a big staff and a big budget. Well, that's how things work in Washington, they'll tell you. Oh, no, it's not. No, it's not. Not unless you have no choice. If you're the President of the United States, a special counsel is the last thing you want. Why? Because you have no idea where that investigation will go. Ask Bill Clinton. He's still mad about it. And that's why there was no special counsel appointed when Hunter Biden's laptop proved that the Biden family was selling influence to the Chinese government. That's why no special counsel ever interviewed Tony Bobolinsky. Because that was all before Joe Biden suggested he might run again and thwart the ambitions of the next generation of Democratic candidates. So Joe Biden is in very serious trouble tonight. Classified documents that Joe Biden, quote, stored in his garage and left at the Penn Center have been floating around for a full 6 years since Joe Biden left the vice president's office in January of 2017. So it's fair to assume they've been moved around a lot, but they're suddenly surfacing now, right after the midterm election? Why is that? No one has even attempted a convincing explanation. Instead, the media is pretending to argue that it's not a big deal in the first place that Joe Biden stored classified documents near his Corvette, because he admitted doing it when he got caught. And if you admit you've committed a crime, it's not a crime. Weirdly, we haven't heard a lot about the federal tax investigation into Hunter Biden since. And that is strange if you think about it, since we now have tens of thousands of new IRS agents to enforce tax law. And in fact, it wasn't that long ago that the Biden Justice Department, remember this, indicted Donald Trump's 75-year-old accountant because he failed to declare the full value of his work vehicle. I think he was in handcuffs. But somehow these same enforcers of the law cannot be bothered to bring the Hunter Biden investigation to fruition, not when they have a laptop proving that he took millions from the government of China. How does that work exactly? Did he pay every dollar in federal taxes? Did he fully declare the value of his work vehicle or of his crack?
So I think we should be cautious with AI because it affects it's a danger to the public. So I'm sort of worried that, hey, civilization, if we don't make enough people to at least sustain our numbers, perhaps increase a little bit, then civilization is going to crumble. So I've been thinking about AI for a long time, since I was in college, really. It was one of the things that, the sort of 4 or 5 things I thought would really affect the future dramatically. It is fundamentally profound in that the smartest creatures, as far as we know, on this earth are humans. We're obviously weaker than, say, chimpanzees and less agile, but real smarter. So now what happens when something vastly smarter than the smartest person comes along in silicon form? It's very difficult to predict what will happen in that circumstance. Google had acquired DeepMind, and so Google and DeepMind together had about 3/4 of all the AI talent in the world. They obviously had a tremendous amount of money and more computers than anyone else. So I'm like, okay, we have a unipolar world here, where there's just one company that has close to a monopoly on AI talent and computers. And the person who's in charge doesn't seem to care about safety. This is not good. So then I thought, what's the furthest thing from Google would be like a non-profit that is fully open, because Google was closed for profit. So that's why the open in OpenAI refers to open source. transparency, so people know what's going on. And that we don't want to have like while I'm normally in favor of for-profit, we don't want this to be sort of a profit-maximizing demon from hell.
That's right.
That's how OpenAI would.
So you want specious incentives here, incentives that.
Yes, I think we want pro-human.
Yeah.
Let's make the future good for the humans.
Yes.
Yes, because we're humans. So I think we should be cautious with AI, and we should. I think there should be some government oversight because it affects it's a danger to the public, and so when you have things that are a danger to the public, like let's say food and drugs. That's why we have the Food and Drug Administration and the Federal Aviation Administration, the FCC. We have these agencies to oversee things that affect the public, where there could be public harm, and you don't want companies cutting corners on safety, and then having people suffer as a result. So that's why I've actually for a long time been a strong advocate of AI regulation. So that I think regulation it's not fun to be regulated. It's somewhat arduous to be regulated. I have a lot of experience with regulated industries because automotive is highly regulated. You could fill this room with all the regulations that are required for a production car just in the United States, and then there's a whole different set of regulations in Europe and China and the rest of the world. So I think we should take this seriously, and we should have a regulatory agency. I think it needs to start with a group that initially seeks insight into AI, then solicits opinion from industry, and then has proposed rulemaking, and then those rules will probably, hopefully, grudgingly be accepted by the major players in AI. And I think we'll have a better chance of advanced AI being beneficial to humanity in that circumstance.
But all regulations start with a perceived danger. Planes fall out of the sky, or food causes botulism.
Yes.
I don't think the average person playing with AI on his iPhone perceives any danger. Can you just roughly explain what you think the dangers might be?
The danger, really, AI is perhaps more dangerous than, say, mismanaged aircraft design or production maintenance or bad car production, in the sense that it has the potential, however small one may regard that probability, but it is non-trivial. It has the potential of civilizational destruction. There's movies like Terminator, but it wouldn't quite happen like Terminator because the intelligence would be in the data centers.
Right.
The robot's just the end effector. But I think perhaps what you may be alluding to here is that regulations are really only put into effect after something terrible has happened.
That's correct.
If that's the case for AI, and we only put in regulations after something terrible has happened, it may be too late to actually put the regulations in place. The AI may be in control at that point.
You think that's real? It is conceivable that AI could take control and reach a point where you couldn't turn it off, and it would be making the decisions for people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
No, that's definitely the way things are headed. Things like say ChatGPT, which is based on GPT-4 from OpenAI, which is a company that I played a critical role in creating, unfortunately.
Back when it was a nonprofit?
Yes. The reason OpenAI exists at all is that Larry Page and I used to be close friends, and I would stay at his house in Palo Alto, and I would talk to him late into the night about AI safety. And at least my perception was that Larry was not taking AI safety seriously enough. And
what did he say about it?
He really seemed to be wanted sort of digital superintelligence, basically digital God, if you will, as soon as possible.
He wanted that?
Yes. He's made many public statements over the years that the whole goal of Google is what's called AGI, artificial general intelligence, or artificial superintelligence. And I agree with him that there's great potential for good, but there's also potential for bad. And so if you've got some radical new technology, you want to try to take a set of actions that maximize the probability that it will do good and minimize the probability it will do bad things.
Yes.
It can't just be hell for leather, just go, barreling forward and, hope for the best. And then at one point, I said, well, what about, we're going to make sure humanity's okay here.
How can you have a democracy with technology like that? I mean, if democracy is, government by the people, each person's vote is equal to every other person's vote, and people are choosing their votes freely, Can you have a democracy with this?
Well, that's why I raised the concern of AI being a significant influence in elections. And even if you say that AI doesn't have agency, well, it's very likely that people will use the AI as a tool in elections. You know, if the AI is smart enough, are they using the tool, or is the tool using them? So I think things are getting weird, and they're getting weird fast.
So you've seen a couple regional bank collapses.
Yeah.
And we've been told that's not a big deal, that these are isolated and each one collapsed for unique reasons. It's not systemic in any sense. What's your sense of the stability of the American banking system?
Well, it's actually at this point a global banking system problem.
It is.
So, you know, we have a situation here where it's not that the canary in the coal mine has died, but the miners are starting to die too. Silicon Valley Bank collapsing overnight is one hell of a big canary. You know, it's more like a turkey. I mean, it's not like some small fry thing. I think that there is a serious danger with the global banking system. There's a strong argument that if you were to actually mark to market the portfolios of the banks, the loans and whatnot, that the entire banking industry would have negative equity.
It feels that way.
Yes. So if you look at, say, commercial real estate, like offices and whatnot, the whole work from home thing has substantially reduced office usage in cities around the world. You know, I think San Francisco's at 40% off. And San Francisco is like an extreme example, but I think it's on 40% vacancy. Even New York has. I think almost all cities at this point have record vacancies in commercial real estate. But the commercial real estate used to be something that was a grade A asset. If a bank had commercial real estate holdings, those would be considered the highest security, some of the safest assets you could have. Now that is not the case anymore. One company after another is canceling their leases or not renewing their leases, or if they go bankrupt, there's nothing for the bank who owns that real estate to go after, because they're previously strong company, now dead. What do you go after at that point? We really haven't seen the commercial real estate shoe drop. That's more like an anvil, not a shoe. So the stuff we've seen thus far actually hasn't even. It's only slightly real estate portfolio degradation, but that will become a very serious thing later this year, in my view. I think if we see, which we're likely to see, a drop in house prices because the interest rates are too high, and for most people when buying a house, they look at the monthly payment.
Of course.
If you're a 30-year mortgage, the vast majority of it is interest. So if the Fed rate is high, you have a high base interest rate. Effectively, the price you can pay for the house drops because you now have to pay more interest, which means that if you've got a fixed monthly payment, you can now afford to buy a house for less money. It effectively drops the prices of houses.
Yes.
This is the kind of thing that tends to accelerate, so that then you can get negative equity in the home market as well. And so if banks end up having loan losses in both their commercial and, well, they're definitely going to have loan losses in their commercial portfolio, but also in their mortgage portfolio, this is a dire situation. There is a solution to mitigate the magnitude of the damage here, which is for the Fed to lower the rate. But they raised the rate again. Now, if I recall correctly, which important caveat, I think the last time the Fed raised rates going into a recession was 1929.
What happened next?
Yeah, the Great Depression.
But the concern is if the Fed drops rates again, then inflation will accelerate, and you can't do that in an election year. So
inflation is going to happen no matter what. If you increase the money supply, you get inflation.
Right.
So there's not some magical cure for getting rid of inflation, except to increase the productivity, the output of goods and services. What is money? You've got these sort of it's basically numbers in a database that sum up to some total. Then you've got the output of goods and services of the economy, and the as long as the ratio of money to ratio of goods and services stays, if that stays constant, you have no inflation. If you add more money, if you add money to the system faster than you increase goods and services,
right,
then you have inflation. So all of these COVID sort of stimulus bills were not paid for. They just generated more currency. More money was created because the federal government, the checks always pass, unless you hit a debt limit, which there's probably going to be some debt limit crisis later this year. But provided you haven't hit the debt limit, the federal government, unlike state governments or city governments or individuals, can simply issue more money, and that's what they did. I mean, as the old saying goes, there's no free lunch. So if you could just issue massive amounts of money without negative consequences, why don't we just take that to the limit and make everyone a trillionaire? They tried that in Venezuela. How'd that work out?
Well, they had to eat zoo animals.
Right, it's not good, There's no free lunch. There's not some ability to issue money and not have inflation.
But you think that we take our existence here for granted?
Yeah, I think
there are threats to it.
Yeah, exactly. So I just think we should not assume that civilization is robust. And if you look at the history of civilizations, the rise and fall of the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Sumerians, Rome, there's throughout the world there've been the rise and fall of many civilizations. So there's an arc, there's sort of a life cycle arc to civilizations, just as there is to individual humans.
Yes. And
I think we just want to make sure that we have civilization go onward and upward. That's, for example, why I'm concerned about decreasing birth rates and the fact that, for example, Japan had twice as many deaths last year as births. So that's they're a leading indicator.
Can I say, and you've written and talked a lot about this, but can I just ask you to pause just for a parenthetical note? Why is that? I mean, the urge to have sex and to procreate is, after breathing and eating, the most basic urge. Yes. How has it been subverted?
Well, it's just in the past we could rely upon simple limbic system rewards
yes,
in order to procreate. But once you have birth control and abortions and whatnot, now you can still satisfy the limbic instinct, but not procreate. So we haven't yet evolved to deal with that, because this is all fairly recent, the last 50 years or so, for birth control. So I'm sort of worried that, hey, civilization, if we don't make enough people to at least sustain our numbers, perhaps increase a little bit, then civilization is going to crumble. There's the old question of will civilization end with a bang or a whimper? Well, it's currently trying to end with a whimper in adult diapers.
Yes.
Which is depressing as hell.